Watch what's approaching, the supreme moment. Reality striking closer than it seems, don't it? Go ahead, it's for the taking if you want it. If not, the dream dies and you'll be forever haunted. Then confront it.
What's good? I had been planning on doing a video on this for a little while and just came across finding the time to actually do it. So I definitely want to talk about this because it's been a while since I've actually discussed the prospects of this happening. But, 5 years in, I think it's about damn time Dokkan actually does revamp or revise or enhance the friend system. Ultimately, this is still a common occurring problem, not so much for popular frequently used category leads or leader types or whatever the case is, but if you go very specific as to for example, like an Android 13 leader where it's attack reduction by a certain percentage, good luck finding that, because honestly you won't. So it shouldn't be that difficult to actually implement this, and we can kind of talk about it piece by piece here on this video. But let's go ahead and start off by saying Dokkan Battle has definitely made improvements over time since the beginning. I'm not taking away anything from the development team at Soleil, the progress that's been made since the early days. For example, within the friend system, we do now have a filtering option where you can pinpoint units you're looking for based on type, class, category, etc. It's obviously way better than what it previously was before that, where it really did just come down to luck, where you would have to just keep scrolling through a friend guest list and hoping that you end up finding a unit that you actually wanted to run as a team setup. So they've made a lot of progress, but I think it's time they kind of reevaluate and start looking ahead in terms of how to further optimize the user experience in a way. So like I said, it's not really a problem right now in terms of popular frequently used category leads and units. Like the transforming cooler is still pretty prevalent. I use that guy as a friend lead pretty much every day whenever I'm grinding rank. Of course, the 5-year LR units shouldn't be too bad to find. The agility LR, go on, so on. You can find those units relatively easy. However, like I said earlier, when you're looking for a very specific type, like let's say for example you want to run a 70% type lead and you want to run an event based on a team you built for that. Chances are you might come across them occasionally, but I have a hard time believing that'll be a regular occurrence where you end up finding them. So that's pretty much another issue with that. Another issue, I don't really come across this, but I've heard, in the low mid rank levels, you are, running the risk of running into a bunch of RSR type units on the friends and guest lists. A lot of it's probably based on like reroll accounts and stuff like that. But again, once you're at somewhat of a higher rank, that's not really much of an issue. But I did hear that's certainly a common problem. So when your friend and guest list is pretty much populated with that kind of stuff, I can imagine it can be quite annoying to find the right units. So you can still filter those out with the filtering system, but nevertheless it's still a problem with the current state of the current mechanics. So let's just talk about what kind of solutions we can look for then. So I think honestly it's universally agreed amongst most players to basically have a mirrored leader option that, basically the leader you have set. So, the perks are pretty self-explanatory with that in terms of, what benefits that'll bring. But from a development standpoint, I don't really think that should be too hard to implement. They can set a default leader for stuff like Super Battle Road and Punch Machine based on certain types of units that benefit from those particular events, or restricted to only being able to use certain units in that event. So I would imagine mirroring leads to your own leaders wouldn't be overly difficult to engineer or develop. So I would imagine it's not really that much of a roadblock to implement. You know what I mean? So along with implementing something like that, they can still keep the traditional list format of the random friends and guests being generated on top of that. But that the mirroring thing would be such a great thing to implement, because you would essentially get the exact same potential system builds to how you have it figured out as well. Ability to run any category leader setting. I mean, 0 downtime looking for leaders. I mean, that will be in itself a huge advantage. I mean, that would enhance the player experience so much, in my opinion. Another perk for that is basically whales in the game, will somewhat be rewarded by being able to run their ideal teams. Based on the leaders needed, they could essentially run whatever the hell they want. I thought about this too. Adding a search function for a specific unit could be beneficial, but I don't think it'll be quite enough. I mean, you're still going to essentially run into the same problem of not being able to find leaders because none of your friends or guests or whatever ended up setting them as leads, or it's a limited grouping of people that have set a particular unit as leads. So that's pretty much the limitation that adding a search function would bring to the user experience. I think a couple of things I do want to note is a little bit of precaution, right? For example, the World Tournaments have a very, very competitive environment, and obviously optimizing that for mirroring leads or whatever could potentially cause some issues. I don't necessarily think it will, but I think the whole total points is probably going to increase because essentially there's 0 downtime looking for leads. So, I don't necessarily know if that's something they want to implement for this in particular, but they can keep certain things normal in the way they are currently. Meanwhile, in your Dokkan events or whatever the case is, you could certainly have the mirror function to where it works, the way you want it to. Super Battle Road, you do have like the default leader settings, but let's be real. I mean, the leaders they have set are pretty horrendous, especially the potential level builds they have set as default really isn't ideal. So, I really think this could really enhance the user experience, and I'm sure they thought about this too, but I'm not quite sure as to why they haven't really implemented this particular system. One of the reasons I can think of is maybe they're worried about the friend system essentially becoming irrelevant by adding an optimized function like mirror leads, because at the end of the day, like, who would use that if that new function was available? The reason I think people would still technically use it is not everybody wants the same potential builds. Maybe they want to try out different ways, and depending on each player, they have their own variation of how they want to build up the potential levels toward additionals, criticals, and evasion. So you still get that versatility and diversity of builds of each unit. Again, it's just severely limited right now because depending on what unit you want to use as a friend or guest lead, you're going to come across that issue of not finding them to begin with. So that in itself is a huge problem. I don't know. I mean, honestly, like, I can't really think of many reasons as to why they haven't implemented it. So if you guys can think of any specific reasons as to why Bandai, Akatsuki, or the development side is a little bit reluctant on implementing a system like mirror leads, I would be interested to find out what your thoughts were on that. So I'll leave it at that for now. I think this pretty much kind of suffices as to my thoughts as to what needs to happen in terms of fixing the friend system itself. I really can't think of a more ideal way. I guess like another variation you could implement is essentially have a default set of list of units, basically maybe like category leads available for any category, but that would bring about a lot of problems because, let's be real for a second, there are a lot of categories introduced in the game at this point. So having each category lead listed on the friend or guest lead could potentially clutter the system a little bit. That I don't think would necessarily work. I say that because I'm thinking from like a setting of like Super Battle Road or specific events like Extreme Z Area where you do have to use a very specific unit to clear those. They have it set to where you do find defaults for that. I just don't know if having that option for, I guess, like basically once you filter it by category, like the top 2 would show up as like the proper category leads for that. I guess, I don't know how that would work in terms of like the programming itself, but that could potentially be a way to work. Is you basically go one node down where you filter by category, and then you get the optimized category leads for that. Within that category you just search for. I mean, I guess technically that could work, and that's kind of the system that you're seeing with the filtering option right now. But it's hard to say what exactly is the right system in terms of like combination of different functions, basically building on top of what we currently have as a friend system. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I'm quite curious what you guys think in terms of how to optimize it, how to make it better. So I'll leave my insights or opinions on that at this state, and kind of let the conversation take itself, take its course or whatever. So feel free to definitely comment about, what your thoughts are on, updating or enhancing the friend system and essentially optimizing the player experience. So leave your comments. Definitely curious as to see what your thoughts are. We'll leave it at that. Hopefully they do some sort of revamp coming up in the near future. I mean, 5 years in, it's about time they do it. So with that being said, hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys later.